host, Wayne Hoffman, and I'm coming to you live from Boise, Idaho. Um, Little interesting story. Actually, I had a positive COVID test, and so I decided, well, I'm not going to, expose Senator Thayn to my Rona, even though I otherwise feel a lot better than I did last night. So, and today. At any rate, it's good to have Senator Thayn here in the studio with us. Welcome, Senator.
Well, thank you, Wayne. It's nice to be here. And by the way, since this is a milder variety of corona, I would have just as soon you came so I could get it.
Oh, really? Oh well,
Yeah.
I can certainly accommodate you if you want. Well, in any, but I don't want to be accused of it of you getting it and then spreading it around the Senate because that would be a bad thing.
Well, that's true.
Any, but anyway, it sure is nice to see you. Senator Thayn is the chairman of the Senate Education Committee. We've just got so much to talk about. I mean, particularly, like just today, there was activity in the Senate relative to education policy, which was House Bill 433, 443, I think, that numbers don't matter really. It's the bill that would allow for the education workforce, the employees of the various school districts, teachers, bus drivers, cafeteria workers, anybody who works in the school district, to join the state health insurance pool for employees. And you voted for that. There were 3 no votes, and this one's been kind of an interesting one. I've had a lot of conversations with lawmakers about it. Tell me what your I heard your debate on the floor, but go ahead and tell the viewers and listeners why you supported the legislation.
Yeah, that's thanks for the opportunity. So years ago, it's probably 6 or 7 years ago, I went down to Oklahoma because I've been very concerned about medical costs, not just for state employees, but everyone else. So I think this was before Obamacare. And I've been trying to figure out ways of reducing costs. In the Oklahoma system, they had their state employees, they had teachers, university presidents, university faculty, staff. They had cities and counties all in the same pool, and it allowed them to negotiate prices. So that's one of the things a larger pool would do. Would be, and that's one of the things I said in the Senate today is we're missing an opportunity here if, as we lay this out, we don't start negotiating prices. We're probably paying somewhere around 250% of the Medicare rate on a lot of these procedures. And what, we could basically say this is the price we're going to pay for procedures, and we have so many covered lives, the hospitals would accept those prices. The other thing that I said in the committee or on the floor was my son is CEO of a small national corporation. So they have about 250 employees, and they're trying to figure out ways to reduce costs of healthcare. So they found themselves a vendor that works with their insurance company, and they go negotiate cash prices. So they negotiated one cash price for a CTE scan or CT scan from $14,000 down to $700. And they pay the money up front, the insurance company does. And so there's no collection and there's no copays on the part of the covered person. So those are some of the things that we could do. The price savings just in doing a cash price approach would be between 40 and 50% on most procedures. So I think there's more upside potential than downside risk with this particular plan. And another thing, there's going to be another bill that comes up tomorrow, or we might hear it on Monday. It's a health savings account for state employees. Been trying to get that in for about 7 years, and it looks like we're going to finally do it. That would reward people to take responsibility for their own health, because a health savings account, you put money into it each month. And if you don't spend it by the end of the year, then it rolls over the next year and you can build up a nice nest egg. One of the real problems with healthcare is people are not taking responsibility for their own health. They're wanting to take pills or operations, and sometimes those are necessary, but weight control, exercise, not smoking, these are simple things that we can do to reduce the cost of healthcare. And so that's another thing we need to do as a rather robust wellness program.
So, let me ask you though, and I mean, like I said, very interesting topic. We had viewed some concern on a number of different factors. One was that, and I didn't even know this until it came up in the floor debate in the House, that the state had school employees on the state employee health system up until 1972. Why did the state stop doing that 50 years ago?
I don't know the history of that.
No one does. I just don't know. The state stopped doing it. I kind of thought that maybe somebody would, pose the question, why did we do this and then stop doing it? And now we're going to do it again. There might be a reason that's important in some fashion.
Well, what I've told people when they ask me about this, they say, is this the proper role of government? Shouldn't we let the market figure it out? Well, in this particular industry, healthcare, there are very few free market forces. There's so much government spending, so much government regulation that you almost have to create a big enough pool that you can push back against some of these entities. Hopefully that's what will happen.
Well, I think Lori Den Hartog mentioned in her floor debate today, and maybe it was some others did as well, I don't remember, that she believes that it's going to lower property taxes. Do you think that's going to happen?
I think it has a potential, but the problem with lowering property taxes through spending more money on education is it seems like people like to fund education and they like to support it. And so even in 2006, when Governor Risch took M&O off of property, people filled it back in because they seem to have a certain appetite for funding things at a local level. So while it might in the short term, I think people will vote those taxes back on themselves, because educators always say they need more money, and that's really not the greatest need of public education. But so not unless the voters are more informed or more diligent in watching the increase in levies and property taxes than they have been in the past.
Yeah, I tend to think that that a local school district is. You probably won't agree with these words, but I'll say them anyway. They are a taxing district with a football team or a ball team of some kind, and that tends to engender a certain amount of community support from people who enjoy that interaction locally, and that makes their ability to go seek a levy or a bond that much easier. I don't know. Do you think that the local school district should have a property tax levy and bond authority?
I do. In a lot of states, the property taxes are a lot higher to fund schools because there's more of a local and a state contribution. But it'd be worthwhile to have that decision or that discussion. Should we fund everything from the state level? One of the downsides potentially is there's not as much local control, but I don't think that's really relevant in this discussion either, because it's like a little bit like medical expenses or the medical industry. Education is not a free market system, so I don't think you can really use free market analogies in a public school system.
Let's talk a little about where the status of the school system is right now. Tell me what you think though. Where are we? I mean, if you were to give a rating, if you will, or some kind of an analysis, good, bad, excellent, mediocre, what would you call it?
Uh, we're mediocre at best.
Interesting that you say that. Tell us why.
Well, it takes a little bit of history, but you have no time limit on this program, right?
No, have at it. We'll stay until you fall asleep.
uh, so if you go back to the history of the current system of public education, which was really crafted by Horace Mann in the 1830s, 40s, and finally he got it in place in 1852 in Massachusetts. His basic assumption was society could be perfected if we could get kids away from the parents. So the foundation of public education was and always has been the parents are the problem. And you hear that with the all-day kindergarten debate, with the saying we need preschool. It's always, well, parents are on drugs or they're working too much, or, it's always an anti-parent approach. So the basic foundation that parents are the problem, the state should make curriculum decisions. They should train and hire the teachers. It was flawed from the very beginning. So we're starting to see the fallout from that with things being taught in schools, and they've been taught in schools. I mean, for a long time, the parents haven't supported. We knew how to teach math 100 years ago, and they keep coming up with these ideas of new math. And finally, we're starting to go back to some of those principles that we knew 100 years ago. And that's so this reliance upon experts, the experts in the academia at the university level, the experts in the federal government. No, that's not what should drive public education. Public education should be a service organization to help parents. So the fundamental problem with public education can be diagnosed by asking the question, who is responsible to see the kids are educated? And myself, the way I answer that question, most people do, is it's a parent's responsibility. So what's the role of the state? Well, in our state constitution, the Constitution tells us we have to have a public school system, but that doesn't mean the responsibility is the state's. And how you craft that system is completely different. If you think it's the state's responsibility, then you don't care what parents think. And so we're seeing that across the country with critical race theory, with teaching of gender identity issues, with teaching of math in poor ways, not teaching history in a way that supports limited government, not teaching natural law, which I'd love to talk about that a little bit. So this has been going on for 170 years, and it won't improve until we give parents more choices so they can determine what their kids are being taught.
Well, if the foundational concept is flawed, and I was, by the way, very, very excited to hear you say that. If the underlying concept is flawed, why don't we amend the state constitution and get the government out of the education business?
Well, that's a pretty simple answer. The people aren't ready to do that.
Why not?
Because they wouldn't vote for it. Why aren't they ready? Because people have been brought up in the public education system. They like the public education system, and before they would vote for a change like that, they'd need to see what we would be moving toward. So we need to talk about what we're building more than what we don't like, so people can feel comfortable about making change.
So one of those things is an education savings account, which we've been talking about with a lot of legislators this year. Of course, folks have been talking about education choice programs at the Capitol for as long as I've been around the building, 20 something years. What are the odds of seeing something like that, an education savings account, a voucher, something that truly gives parents real education choice for Idaho parents this year?
Well, let me answer the question directly, and then let me follow up on it. So the answer this year is zero.
Wow,
And
zero.
Yeah, pretty much zero. And the reason I can tell you that is because I've got 5 members of my committee, and I need I need 5 votes to get something out, and I won't get anything out.
How many votes do you think you have right now?
4.
You have 4. You only have. This is a Republican-controlled legislature, Republican-controlled Senate Education Committee, and you can't summon the votes to get an education savings account out of your committee.
So we'll talk about that in a second. Let me go back to the original question. I'm not dodging the question. I want to talk about it. So there's 2 types of school choice. The type of school choice that you're talking about, an education savings account, you have to leave the public school system to use it. And since 90% or more of the parents in the state are using the public education system, they're just inherently opposed to that. I mean, I think in time they probably will warm up to it. The other type of school choice is choice within the system, which is what I've been working on the whole time I've been over here. And well, there's 2 basic types of school choice. School choice within the system, there's a lot of appetite for, and I think we need to build on that. And as parents get more comfortable having choices, they'll want more choices. You know, one of the best things that have ever happened to the United States was the homeschool movement. The homeschool movement broke several paradigms. One, that uneducated, untrained parents can do a good job. You know, the paradigm was you need trained teachers to educate. Well, homeschooling blew that out of the water. Just doesn't. And the other is you need to spend a lot of money, and that's not the case either. Why homeschooling works is because parents are involved, they're interested, and they have their children pick that up, and they've got some good curriculum that they can choose from. So back to the 5 votes on the committee. Well, let me finish up about homeschooling. Homeschoolers and the homeschooling movement has opened people's minds that you don't need experts to run everything. It's a very important concept. The founding fathers said we're all created equal. And what that means is we should all have equal right to make decisions over our own affairs. Well, every other form of government, from kings to communism, socialism, dictators, pharaohs, emperors, they all felt like the experts, the elites should rule. And so what really bothers me during this COVID outbreak is we're going back to the rule by the elites. We're letting Anthony Fauci and different people set policy. In the United States, experts were listened to, but they were never allowed to set policy. Policy was always set by elected officials or was left to the people to make their own policy in their own homes. And so this idea that you don't have to rely on homeschooling has really helped people understand that you don't have to be an expert to be successful. And I think if we turn this thing around, that the homeschooling movement in the 70s and 80s, we can go back to there and say, they're the ones that showed us that freedom works. Now,
But go ahead.
well, you're asking about the 5 votes. So Republican really isn't the issue. That's not really what we're fighting, Republican, Democrat, though there are differences between Republicans and Democrats. Most Democrats today are simply socialists. They want the government to do everything. In fact, we had the tax cut bill, and I got up and spoke and said that we have a paradigm problem here. For 120 years, at least, we've been trying to build government institutions to solve our community's problems, like poverty or medical access to medical care or education. We're going to provide food stamps. We're going to do a retirement system. We're going to build another government program. What we should have been doing is we should have said, what can we do to help families solve their own problems so we don't need to spend the money and they become independent on their own right? So I got up and said that. And I said, one of the things about this tax cut that's good is in order for people to be independent of government, they need to at least have the money, enough money that they can make their own decisions. And so giving the money back to them makes sense. Well, Senator Stinnett stood up right after me and she said, well, we need this money for roads. We need this money for education. We need this money for ambulance. She listed, 5, 10 different government entities that we needed to strengthen, which was the exact point that I've been making or trying to make, is that we need to stop looking at institutions as our savior and start saying, what can we do to build the capacity of people to solve their own problems so we don't need the institution to take care of people? And so what we're fighting against is really between, I finished that thought. So Republicans generally are not socialists. They believe in the free market system, whereas most Democrats are, pretty much full on socialists. Some might argue with me on that, but the way they vote, it seems like they're just voting to empower the state. But in the Republican Party, we have a little bit different problem. They're not socialists, but they're elitists, many of them. I'd say the Republican Party is kind of split half and half in the legislature. So what an elitist does is very similar to a socialist. An elitist trusts experts more than they trust freedom, and they trust institutions more than they trust families. So you can ask somebody a question, how are we going to solve this problem? If they say, well, we need to listen to the experts and give more money to public education, you know that they're an elitist. They're coming from that elitist perspective. And so
Stephen, I don't doubt any of that, but I mean, if we're honest about the tax policy, I don't really want to get into tax policy discussion just yet. But okay, so the Republican-controlled legislature voted to lower income taxes from 6.5 to 6. That's great, but your taxes are still much higher than they were when the Democrats created the income tax in Idaho in 1931. So why can't the 85% Republican-controlled legislature get to a place that the income tax in 1931, the top marginal rate was 4%, and that was for an income of about $20,000, which in today's numbers is about $360,000. Most Idahoans paid a 1% income tax. They didn't have a sales tax. They did have a statewide property tax. But now you've got them all, and at a higher rate than you've ever had before, and that's Republicans.
Well, let's go back to the issue that we haven't finished yet.
Yeah, go ahead. We go down a lot of rabbit trails.
Well, I don't want you to get distracted. Maybe I should have brought a pencil and paper so I can keep track here.
We'll try to keep up.
So you ask why I can't get an ESA out of the Senate Education Committee, because we have two Democrats and 3 Republicans that are more comfortable giving money to the public education system. And they see that as harming the system. And they don't really, the way I'm looking at it, they can speak for themselves. They don't trust giving power to the people to make their own decisions. So your
Republican colleagues don't.
Yeah, I've got 3 of them in my committee that don't. Yes, that's correct.
How much of that has influence over the fact that last legislative session, your committee rejected a bill that would have said school boards may or may not negotiate with the teachers union? Do they trust teachers unions more than they trust parents?
So I didn't support that bill. I wasn't there that day, but I didn't support that bill because I think there's a better way to go about it. There's principles you follow, and then you have to apply them to real life situations. So you're kind of bringing up an issue that I'm not sure is really relevant because we're talking about school choice, but I can talk about it if you want. But
well, I was just trying to get a sense as to what's going on with your committee, because it's not just that, but it's also, okay, so you said the ESA can't pass.
I don't think it will, no.
last year there was a bill to at least let school boards decide whether or not to negotiate with the union. That failed in your committee. We can't get rid of Common Core because of your committee. Let's see, what else am I
That's
forgetting?
not correct. That's not correct.
There was a bill this legislative
That is
session.
not correct. We are getting Common Core, rid of Common Core. This year, we're going to get rid of the English language arts, the science, and the math standards that are known as Common Core. And we're replacing them, as Representative Clow has a bill and a resolution to do that. And it's supported by me, and I think by my committee, it will be supported. And we have rewritten the standards using IDO teachers and parents. So we voted 3 years ago to go down the process to get rid of it 2 years ago, whatever it was. And so that process is coming to a conclusion and Common Core will be gone. You're basically making the claim that the House voted 3 years ago to get rid of Common Core and they did not.
No, I didn't say that. The House.
No, we've had this discussion before. Maybe we haven't, so we should.
Go
But
ahead.
the motion that Judy Boyle made to get rid of those standards, she said in the motion that as soon as we leave, they'll put those same standards back in place. And so it was more theater than actual accomplishing anything. What we did that session is we wrote a letter to the State Department, the State Board, and the governor, and it was signed by all the members of the Republicans in the House Education Committee and by Senator Mortimer and I, who were the chairman and vice chair at the time. Go down a process and how we'd get rid of Common Core and what we didn't like and what we wanted to replace. We started down that process. Sherry Barr's office has been very helpful in that process. The reason it didn't come to the committee in rule this year is because the governor stopped it. And we're saying we're going to bypass the governor. We're going to put it into statute and we're going to replace Common Core. So,
Okay, well, it's taken all these. First of all, it's not done yet, but it's taken from 2010 to 2022, and in that space, an entire generation of students have graduated under Common Core in Idaho. Who gets to be responsible for that?
You know, I can only do what I can do. I'm not the dictator over there.
No, I know that, but I'm just wondering, if other states recognize that there was an issue, and I guess the question I keep going back to is what it seems to be wrong that is allowing for these unhelpful education policies to prosper in Idaho.
Well, haven't prospered. I mean, we have a similar system in other states too. What was different with Florida is the governor got behind the process and he did things through executive order. So we didn't have the luxury of having the governor deeply involved or interested in making that change. So we had to do it through the legislative process, and by our very nature, it's slow. And
So go back to my other question about the special interest groups, the teachers union, the school boards association, the administrators association. There's an alphabet soup of what we call stakeholder groups. To what degree are they driving the process to remain with the status quo?
So I'd like to change this discussion because I don't think this is really helpful. You're talking about things you don't like. I agree with the things you don't like, but that doesn't, it's almost a TBU. I don't know if you ever read the book. What was the book? Bright Spots, I think. Did you ever read that book by chance?
No.
It talked about, different ways that changes came about. One that I really liked was in Vietnam. After the Vietnam War, they really had a malnutrition problem with the Vietnamese. And so what they did is an American went there, he didn't have any money. He went to some different villages and he found the kids that were doing better than the other kids in the village. And he excluded the ones that were parents were government employees or they had special situations. But there are certain things that these poor families did that didn't have any special access to any special food that got those kids so they were taller, they were stronger, they were doing better. And he really went and tried to figure out what it was that those parents were doing. And he found out what they're doing is they ate rice 3 times a day instead of once a day, or maybe twice a day. Details were a little sketchy. They made some soup out of some vegetable, or that not every parent was doing, but they had a little vegetable in their soup. It was like kale or something. And the third thing is they allowed the children to have access to some protein because the adults had been eating it all. So they did those things, and then they went out and told the other parents, this is what you do if you want to have your kids do better. So they focused on what it was that was working and what they wanted to accomplish and build. I would rather have a discussion on what we can build, what we want.
I have zero problem doing that, Stephen, but I think it's a legitimate question to ask you, what's holding you back from being able to do that? Your committee just a week or so ago couldn't even introduce a bill that would protect parental rights when it comes to masks and vaccine mandates and curriculum. And they couldn't even introduce the bill. Died on a 4-4 vote. So it seems as if there's some other force that's keeping the committee from being able to get legislation moving. It's a legitimate question. Is it
It's inertia.
maybe the answer is the special interest groups have no influence, and you just have a bunch of legislators that don't believe in education choice.
Yeah, it's inertia. They don't believe in education choice, and they tend to have a more of a elitist philosophy. That's what I said before. Nothing's changed. That's the answer.
It's just awfully strange coming from a state like Idaho.
Well, that might be, but
Shouldn't Idahoans demand more when other states have education savings accounts and vouchers and tuition tax credits?
Yeah.
We have none of that here.
Yeah. So, the voters need to be careful who they send. I mean, I can only introduce bills, that parental rights bill. I had a hearing on a print hearing. I voted for it. I can't control the votes of these folks. So why don't we talk about what we're trying to build and how to do that? Because if we're just going to complain about what's going on, this is going to be a short discussion because that's not what I do. I don't complain. I talk about what needs to be done. We can spend a little bit of time saying what the issue is. It's keeping us from going forward. But once we've identified that, let's move on. I'm not here.
Well, I don't know which part of the tightrope this question walks, but there's a proposal this legislative session to expand the education system to include full day kindergarten. Where are you on that? No, I'm not talking about your committee. I'm talking about where's Stephen Thayn on it.
Where's me? I've been consistent since I came over here. I ran for office originally to kill pre-kindergarten because Governor Kemp Thorne had gone to Florida. He was trying to figure out a way to bring pre-kindergarten to Idaho. And it just something snapped in me. And I said, we're just talking about the wrong things here. It's just building the state mentality rather than building the families to solve these problems for us. So I'm not a fan of all-day kindergarten. So let's be realistic, though, of what's happening. The governor put $47 million into K-3 literacy money. At $26 million that's already there, a lot of that has gone to fund all-day kindergarten. So a lot of school districts have all-day kindergarten. Parents are wanting all-day kindergarten. They're using levies to fund all-day kindergarten. And with that $47 million, pretty much every school that has the capacity to open it, they have. So we basically have all-day kindergarten starting next year. Any school district that wants to will. So it's not a question of what I want, but I can tell you how I'm approaching this with the reality that I can't stop it. There's a real problem with all-day kindergarten in a couple of ways. One, the mentality that the perspective that we just spend money and we're going to solve the problem. isn't going to work. I told Senator Crabtree today that if he brings his bill, I need a sunset clause on it. Still doesn't do me a lot of good, but states like Oklahoma and Georgia, there's 4 states that have universal pre-K. Idaho, with its half-day kindergarten, is doing better in 4th and 8th grade reading and math than those states. So we can spend no money and get as good a results as what we'll do if we spend another $100 million on kindergarten. So I don't think kindergarten's necessary. Parents, boys in particular, probably shouldn't go to school until they're 6 or 7. That's what the data shows. Boys mature slower. Kindergarten, by the time of the 4th grade, if you've gone to kindergarten or not, you can't tell. In fact, a lot of these kids burn out because they've been in school so long, 4th and 5th grade. So the data is not good, but everybody in the education establishment says we need all-day kindergarten. So here's what I'm trying to do to at least protect the choice of parents that don't want to send their kids to all-day kindergarten. And that is to have access to some resources if they only choose half day. It's not much, but that's about all I can get. And the other thing is to have in the bill a different way of sending out the money for K-3 literacy. Right now, we send out money based upon low scores in the fall. And what we're trying to move that to is split it up 50% for a year's growth. Students that make a year's growth, 50% of the money will go there. And then 50% of the money would go from fall to fall scores. Because what's happening is a lot of school districts are giving the reading test, it's called the IRI, as early as they can in the fall to capture all the summer learning loss. And then they take it late in the spring to make it look like there's been a lot of growth during that year. And then they have the summer slide, so they start, they have that summer loss. So it's a shell game. And so Representative Kirby has actually come up with a way that we're going to pay for success, not for failure. So there's a few things that we're going to try to do to actually change the paradigm over there. But while I don't support pre-kindergarten, most of the voters do. So I'm trying to salvage what I can out of this train wreck.
Can you still hear me?
I can.
Oh, there we go. Sorry, I lost you for a second.
I quit talking is why you lost me.
Oh, I'm sorry. As I just stopped. Okay, you're on my screen. Your hand is stuck.
Oh.
Weird. Sorry about that. Okay, so, but ultimately, so what you're saying is you would vote for the kindergarten funding bill, with the provisions that you've described. But isn't that the same? Isn't that the same? Isn't that the same result though?
That's a legitimate perspective. I think there's 2 things in the bill that we're going to get that are important. Because I basically told the governor's office today I wouldn't print a straight pre-kindergarten or a straight kindergarten bill. I said we've got to have some sideboards on it. So we'll see if we get that because, but the difference is some different accountability on the K-3 literacy money. I think that's critical.
What's wrong with this? The notion that it's inappropriate for the government to expand the education system, that this is interfering with a parent's province to educate their kids at an early age, and holding fast against something like that.
I just told you, Wayne, we have full day kindergarten next year if we do nothing. We have it already. So we can't hold fast. The only way to hold fast, and I don't think this will work, is to not, because the money will come out of JFAC, is to kill the JFAC bill.
Well, you're the chairman of the, well, so it sounds like you're expecting a policy bill dealing with full day kindergarten.
Yes, that's what I'm wanting, to at least put some sideboards on it and respect the parents who only want to do half-day kindergarten. We don't want to be telling these young mothers that their kids are going to be behind if you don't send your kids to all-day kindergarten. That is not the message we want to send. We want to say we respect any choice you make and we'll support you in any choice. So you're asking me to live a principle that the people in the state of Idaho don't want to live. So it doesn't matter what I think or don't think. We're going to have all-day kindergarten.
I remember in 2011, maybe you remember this too. You were proposing getting rid of kindergarten, and I said that'll never happen, Stephen. And I said let's see if we can get rid of the Arts Commission. And so we had a little gentleman's bet. Which one would happen first? Get rid of the Arts Commission or get rid of full day kindergarten? And the answer is neither. We were both wrong.
We're both wrong.
But my point though is don't you basically then lock in the idea that we're going to have not just full day kindergarten, but one of these days the sideboards that you're putting in, if you get those in, will be gone too, because they're going to be considered a constraint on the government education system.
So you have a different paradigm than I do, Wayne. I believe. So let me describe your paradigm and then let me describe mine. And if I'm wrong, you can set me straight. You are looking, and your paradigm is not totally incorrect. I think it's just missing a piece. Your paradigm is that government should do certain things and shouldn't do other things. And I agree with that. It's based a lot on Ezra Taft's Benson's pamphlet, The Proper Role of Government. And that's great. I love that pamphlet. And we really should have a discussion of what the proper role of government is or isn't. However, Ezra Taft Benson left off a really important part. And that is the role of the citizen. What is the proper role of the citizen? The proper role of the citizen is to accept responsibility. And that is what we need to be building, is the responsibility of citizens to claim their freedom. They are the ones that need to be educating their kids. Now, if they use the public education system, that's fine, but they're responsible. They're the ones that need to be making sure that they have good health, they exercise and don't smoke and, keep their weight down. I mean, freedom is the active, aggressive act of claiming personal responsibility. And a lot of these responsibilities are exercised within the family unit. So what I'm focusing a lot on, and why I don't think you understand what I do half the time, is I'm trying to build the capacity of people for self-government so they'll govern their own lives. And what I'm doing, and like public education, which is a totally socialist system, it just is. It's taking responsibility away from parents. I'm trying to work within that system to give parents choices, because that's how you transfer responsibility from government back to people, is you give them a choice. An ESA would be a wonderful to do that with, because then parents could have access to funds. What I've had to do over the last 16 years is find those little places that I could transfer a little bit of responsibility back to parents. And the more responsibility you transfer back and the more parents that take it, the more appetite you have for more choice. So that's the paradigm that I'm coming from. I'm trying to build the responsibility of our citizens. And if you look at just recently, the self-directed learning bill is a big step in that direction. I'd love to talk about that bill, actually. Are you still there? I guess we lost Wayne. So I'll talk about the bill I want to talk about. So a bill that came out of the Senate Ed Committee and actually passed off the floor of the Senate yesterday, and today's the 3rd of February. It's called the Self-Directed Learning Bill, Learner Bill. What it does is it rewards students that are diligent in their work, that they could have flexibility. And that flexibility can either be within the school system. They might have some different privileges. They might have longer recess. They might not need to come to school on Friday. There's several different ways that could look like. It's left up to the local school districts to decide that. And the other flexibility is outside the school system. So if they want to go to a piano lesson during the school day, or if the parents have something that they would like to, to do with them, as long as they're doing their work, then they could negotiate some of those outside the school activities. Another thing it would do for high school kids, they could easily finish their schoolwork by noon. If they were a diligent student, they could go to work in the afternoon, or they could do a workforce training apprenticeship, like plumbing or electrician or something else. But what this bill does is it allows the parents and the students to take ownership themselves over their own education without getting a bunch of parents involved. It's just them and the school system, them and the teacher. And so it gives us a chance to reward.
There's only one camera. How are we going to do this?
Oh, wait, Dustin brought it back.
Oh, we'll keep talking.
Okay. Well, I figured you had gone somewhere, so I just kept talking.
My phone stopped working. This is what technology does.
All right. You want to pause here?
Dustin. Barely. Okay. We'll get this.
Anyway, I want to talk about it anyway.
Keep talking. Keep talking.
I was just about done.
Well, I mean, that's a fine bill. I mean, there's nothing, I don't see anything particularly wrong with it. It's not, but it's not.
Oh, I don't need that now.
Now you don't. Now you just hear me. So now we're together again. Isn't this weird?
Yeah,
I'm trying to keep you away from the Rona. This is more important.
Oh, this is more important. Well, this really.
So the point is, though, you're trying to your objective is to change the existing system and inject choice into the existing system, because apparently we can't have the same level of choice they do in other states, in Florida and Texas and Arizona.
I hope we can soon. I'm just telling you. I mean, I'm not the. Don't kill the messenger.
Sure.
Because just right now, I don't have the votes in my committee
because the members don't trust the parents, or because they trust the system more?
Well, you'll have to ask them. But what discussions I've had is they don't trust parents. They trust the system more. I think that's fair. So we have 4 votes. I mean, we're really close. And we are getting some good things done, but it's painful. I've been here 16 years. This is my 16th year.
Yeah.
And I remember some of the legislators that were here 16 years ago. Remember Dr. Ring?
Oh, sure. Sure do.
I think things are a lot easier than they were back then. I mean, some of the discussions I'm having now, I couldn't have had back then. It was really difficult to get the bill passed that allowed students to challenge a class. And one of the reasons that one of the senators, I think it was Senator Schroeder at the time, he says, we can't do that because we don't know what we're teaching. He actually said that in committee. Anyway, so I understand your frustration and why we can't, but that's the reason. And so voters need to get a little bit more informed.
Let's switch over to, I mean, we could keep talking about K-12 all day, but I do want to get to the higher education system.
Okay.
So last year, the legislature, well, actually, let me go back even further. In 2019, the Boise State University was bragging about the social justice stuff they were doing on campus. 2020 lawmakers said, universities, get back to your core mission, report back what you've done. They didn't do anything. 2021, the legislature cut $2.5 million from social justice programs on 3 of the college campuses. They didn't do anything. Nothing's changed. What are you guys going to do about that?
Well, that's kind of interesting question. Most of my time, I've spent most of my effort in K-12. That's just what I've done.
Sure, but
so that's where I've spent most of my effort and had most of my success. But going back to this thing about what we're trying to build, one of the questions I asked all the university presidents, I talked to them about natural law. And I explained to them why natural law was so important, because natural law is the only secular philosophy that supports limited government, because it says there's a fixed law and we need to try to discover it, and it governs the universe. What that means is if we have to try to discover it, it's two important points. One is we don't know what it is exactly because it's not written down. And the only way that we can discover it is by having a reasonable conversation with our two perspectives of what we think is natural law. So it requires legitimate, honest, frank discussion of what we're thinking. The second important point is if there's a law up there that everyone should be trying to discover and obey, then it places limitation on the rulers because they need to obey it also. So the other basic philosophy that people use to justify different forms of government is called relativism. There's a lot of different forms of it, and there's a lot of different forms of government, like communism, socialism, dictators, fascism. But really, there's just one form. That is one law for rulers, and there's another set of rules for everyone else. And that's what we're moving to in the United States right now with this corona, and you have passports. And so I asked these university presidents where they're teaching natural law philosophy of Cicero and John Locke to their beginning students. So we're starting to get the discussion going on what it is that what we need in order to support limited government. And we need to understand the principles of natural law. So you can do a YouTube video search, or there's quite a few of them out there. Start to understand that natural law is really something very concrete. The Declaration of Independence and the Founding Fathers all spoke of natural law. One of the things I think we've done to a disservice, the religious people in the 20th century and in the 21st century now, is we're talking about a moral, John Adams said, the Constitution's only for moral people, moral government, And so they've always looked at Christianity. And Christianity is fine. It's a very nice form of civic virtue and morality. It's fine. I don't have any problem with Christianity. Don't get me wrong.
I've never accused you of that.
Well, people are listening to me and they might be saying, well,
no, I don't
this guy's a heathen.
No, not at all. Go ahead.
But what really united them was this philosophy of natural law, because Christianity and natural law actually have some similarities, potentially. But natural law says there's an eternal law that we need to try to discover. And when we discover it, we're blessed. And the worker, for example, should keep the fruits of his labor. One man or woman is not better than another. Now, our founders somewhat violated that with slavery, but they had to work through that. But the ideal of natural law does not allow for dictatorships for a Hitler, for a Stalin, or for a Fauci.
Yes.
So that's one thing we should be building at the university level. So I'm trying to focus on what it is we're trying to build.
Okay, well, that's fair. So
Yeah.
the legislature is considering budgets and policies relative to the education system, including the higher education system. What shall the legislature do to get the universities back on course in 2022 during the session?
Well, I don't know if there's anything we can do this session, but I've been visiting with some people trying to come up with some long-term strategies, because the problem's not going to go away.
We recognize there is a problem.
Yeah, well,
Scott Green and Marlene Trump at last week, 2 weeks ago, tried to make it sound like there is no problem. You're not buying that.
No. I was taught socialism in the 70s. It's just gotten worse.
So we can wait another year to go deal with it. I mean,
no,
am I asking too much?
Well, the question is, how do we deal with it, and how do we? So that there's a few things we could do. One is we could start funding universities differently. For example, let's take teacher colleges. Teacher colleges are kind of a cash cow for universities, meaning they don't have to put out much money, and yet the university, those potential teachers are paying as much in tuition as an engineering or science student, right?
Yeah, sure.
Well, so let's take colleges of education, I actually think we should change the whole model and have it more of an apprenticeship model where they do some night classes or summer classes, but they're actually out in the classroom with a good teacher being trained, more like a plumber or a electrician. So we ought to get those people out of universities.
Sure.
And then we ought to have some metrics in place. And maybe this would.
Are you saying that the project? I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I guess I did since I did interrupt you.
You did interrupt me.
Okay.
I'll try to keep my.
Are you
thought.
saying though? Are you saying that? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I want to make sure I understand this. That the universities have a monopoly on the teacher credentialing process, the certification process, and so therefore they're stuck in that system. You're saying there might be an alternative to how we prepare teachers for the world of teaching.
I think that's pretty accurate. I think they have a pretty much a monopoly. There's some alternative teacher, pathways,
right. ABCTE, and
yeah, things like that. So and they work pretty well. But I'm saying that the whole teacher preparation program, I think, could undergo a change, and let the students decide if they want to do an apprenticeship model or want to do the traditional model, and see which one works best. I think the apprenticeship model actually makes sense. So that in conjunction with, we ought to start putting like career technical education. They have to say how many people got a job in the profession that they were trained for. We need to start having metrics like that, because some of these degrees, like sociology, where a lot of this, the worst of this is taking place, they're taking advantage of the students by making them pay tuition and going into debt. And then they're going out and are they getting jobs? Well, if they're not, we need to start saying there needs to be some truth in advertising here.
Did you read our Center for American Education report on bad returns degree programs that just don't generate any real ROI for students?
Well, I don't know if I read the last one, but I've read, that's one reason we're talking about this, is that type of idea.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, we've documented that it's happening here in Idaho. You go to a university, you get a degree, and you're working at Starbucks, and no one really cares.
So those are some of the things I think we could start putting in place, and maybe I should approach. The question when it comes to legislation is, how do you actually get some of these things in place that do something? Would it be best to go through intent language? What would do we need to write a bill? The session in some ways is almost over. What a lot of people don't recognize is that
bite your tongue.
no. What I'm saying is,
yeah. So we've got February to get things done, and you're really wrapping things up in March, basically.
Well, and most of the bills that we're going to see this year began 6 months ago.
Sure.
So to have this discussion about what we should do, I think is really important. But the expectation that gets done this year, unless we can do something through intent language and JFAC, is probably not going to happen.
Well, no, but I mean, the reason that I ask about this year is because if you don't do anything, if you don't in some way say, hey, we told you to do this, and you had the university system just disregard what the legislature said, if they get away with that, doesn't that send the wrong message? Even if your intention is in 2023, you're going to go do something, for this year, they're going to continue doing exactly what they've always done, and they're going to get away with ignoring the legislature.
So do you have a suggestion that I can?
Yeah, I would cut $20 million or more from the university's budgets.
So
I would say, okay, guys, we've told you we want no more of the social justice stuff. Get rid of your diversity and inclusion statements. Get rid of the statements in hiring practices. The universities that are actually going out and making new employees sign pledges that avow fealty to the DEI statements is incredible that they're still doing that now.
So are they doing that in Idaho?
They're doing it in Idaho. They're doing it here and now. And we've documented it. But they'll keep doing it,
send that Ann over tomorrow.
And even if you read the University of Idaho's report saying that we were all wrong about the social justice agenda,
that was
their report even acknowledges they're still doing it.
That was not the greatest report.
I'm glad to hear you say that.
Well, while they're discussing it, it was like. what was their criteria to have proof? I mean, so yeah, have Anna come over tomorrow and
Sure.
and bring me some of that.
And Anna Miller, our education policy director and the head of the Center for American Education. But back to the whole, I mean, how do we get there? JFAC will say, well, the education committees need to send us a policy. And the education committees say, well, that's more of a budgetary thing. And so no one's really claiming responsibility. And it seems as if there's a very high likelihood that, yes, the universities will get away with doing what they've done.
So how I started this discussion, which you didn't like the answer. Let me tell you.
I love all your answers.
No, you don't love my answer. Let me tell you why it's relevant. I said I've been doing most of my work in K-12.
Sure.
I started this 30 years ago. I've been in the legislature 16. Figuring out the niche that you can start effectuating any change is very difficult. And I haven't spent the time on higher ed how to do that.
So your niche then, what you're telling me is K-12.
It has been, yeah. I need some help to understand the chinks in the armor of higher ed. I'm not some genius that understands, because there's interlocking relationships. In some ways, the university presidents, in fact, I got an interesting story to tell you. They don't know what's going on in their college at a granular level. I actually met with a student who was dropped out of a class because she was being mentally abused by a teacher. And we took that documentation to the state board. And, Matt Friedman said, this is the first documented case anyone's brought to us. So
he said that when?
A few months ago.
Well, do you believe that?
I like Matt Freeman. He's always been a straight shooter for me.
Okay.
So the level that they need of proof might be different than yours. But I'm just saying that's what he told me. So to find how, and one thing we have to do, so we go back to the university presidents there in my committee. I asked them 3 questions. One of them had to do with, what was the first one? Had to do with civic virtue. Oh, I know. It's American exceptionalism.
American exceptionalism.
Exceptionalism. It's late at night. I want to go home.
Words are hard, especially when it's late. You're right.
It's easy for you to say. Anyway, I talked about how, the world prior to 1789, when the Constitution was signed, and the world 30 years later, when the Constitution, the free market, and some capital really, Adam Smith and all came together. By 1820 or so, the United States became the leader because of freedom and free market economics. That basically Cleon Skousen called it a 5,000-year leap in human progress. And the United States had a significant role in bringing billions of people out of poverty because other countries copied at least our economic system.
No question.
So I said, are your students being exposed to this?
What's the answer?
Well, they're university presidents. I like university presidents, and I think they're generally pretty good. But as superintendents, university presidents, they get to the position they're in because they give the answers you want to hear. I mean, it's just the way it is. They were very respectful answers, and they were nice, and they actually gave me a list of where some of some courses. Well, the next question had to do with natural law and the importance of natural law. So each one of these questions are about 2 minutes long. And they actually gave me a list of courses where natural law was taught. Unfortunately, at ISU or at U of I, most of them are in their law degree program. So they have very few. Now, NCSC at Lewiston and North Idaho College are actually doing a fairly good job. They have some professors that actually teach natural law in their courses, and CWI doesn't do too bad a job. But BSU, her answers were not nearly as satisfactory. And the president of Idaho State University, he actually wanted to go on that topic for quite a long time.
Interesting.
So I think that we need to talk about things that we are really troubled by. We also need to talk about things that we really want to see. The third question had to do with the respectful dialogue and the cancel culture and how that leads to tyranny. I mean, and of course, they also said that they had processes in place and everyone was respected. But I had an interesting discussion with, and I can't tell you who because, well, they're not supposed to be talking.
You can always tell me who.
Oh, well, they're not supposed to be talking
I
to
won't
me
tell
about things.
anybody.
Yeah, we're
okay.
public
Well,
here.
never mind then.
But this person said, well, you know, the schools talk about anti-bullying, but the most bullying I've seen has been from teachers. I said, yeah, that's kind of the case. And I don't even know if teachers realize the power they have over students because they can give them a grade. And it's pretty easy to know what teachers want. I got F's in a couple of classes, one in particular, because I told the teacher what I thought. Well, I wanted to graduate later when I was a little older. So either I didn't take classes, I just took them online where I could challenge the class, or I just kept my mouth shut. So that's abuse, really. So yeah, it's going on. It's been going on in my experience. I've been kicked out of school, out of high school. I mean, so I'm very sensitive to the fact there's indoctrination going on and it's not as subtle as it should be.
Well, it's very subtle in some respects. Did you read? I know it's brand new, but Anna's report on critical social justice in the K-12 system in Idaho. It's more than subtle.
I haven't.
She describes an incident in Coeur d'Alene where a young girl was convinced that she was a boy, and the school district didn't tell the parents. They referred them with boy names and boy pronouns. That's really messed up. She documented cases of other kinds of indoctrination taking place all over the school system in Idaho.
Oh, no, I totally believe that's the case. So one thing we're doing about that, because I always try to come up with solutions. I'm not arguing that trying to defend it but it's based on this idea that parents don't know what's best. It goes back to Horace Mann. So yeah, it's the environment is parents don't have a voice. So almost every bill you've seen of mine gives parents a greater voice. It might be incremental, but so what we're doing in Emmett is we used the innovative classroom bill from last year that allows a process for parents to get together and petition the school board to have a different curriculum. So we're trying to get the Hillsdale government class in Emmett High School. And this has been a fascinating experience. I mean, really finding out that I think the biggest problem is because people really don't say what they mean, except for me, because I'm a natural law sort of guy. I tell you what I'm thinking.
You've never been bashful about saying what's on your mind.
Well, I'm not angry about it. It's just how I see things.
Sure. Same here.
And if you disagree, then we can have a discussion. But when someone is manipulating because they're not saying what the true agenda is, it's confusing for a lot of people that aren't really deeply involved in the issue. So the real issue on the Hillsdale course, in my opinion, is they're afraid that parents are going to start coming in and requesting curriculum on a regular basis. And I think that's frightful for teachers. And to me, it's really sad that teachers view parents as the enemy, as a force to be feared. They should be embracing. We have parents, we have 200 parents in Gem County that would love to have this curriculum. This is wonderful. We'd love to have, they're not doing that. See that they're fighting us is really sad.
Okay, and I understand that,
but we're trying to get the natural law discussion started.
Sure, but again, this is Idaho. Shouldn't the Hillsdale curriculum be the rule and not the exception?
What makes you think Idaho is so great?
Well, I mean, most of the electorate is conservative.
People have to make decisions. Freedom is claimed by people taking responsibility. Idahoans, I think they're better than most places, but more of us need to step up to the plate and claim our responsibilities. That's how we claim freedom, is to claim our responsibilities. And I'm challenging Idahoans to step up to the plate. It's your responsibility so your kids are educated. but let's do it in a constructive manner. But why is the whole country is infected with this centralization of responsibility called socialism? We've been trained like that for generations.
Sure, and I don't deny that, but you just said that the existing system is going to perpetuate, right?
That's what it does.
We just have to figure out a way to deal with that fact. Well, one way you can deal with that fact is by having, instead of the existing curriculum for civics and history and you know civics, history, and American government and so on, could be the Hillsdale model, and then a school district can provide the opt-out that you just described. No, I don't want that. I want to have a Keynesian economics course in my school district, and the school board could vote on that. So the default education system is socialistic, and we have to go and find exceptions here and there.
To begin with, it'll change over time.
So how long will that take, Stephen?
Well, here's something you can help me with. So can your listeners. Well, there's innovative classrooms, so we could do that in more places. And I was told at that meeting that I went to on yesterday that Grangeville's using some of that curriculum. That's interesting. I know there's 2 Hillsdale charter schools in the state of Idaho. One's running, the other's going to be up and running. But introduced on Monday, we're going to introduce a resolution to have a standalone civics curriculum. And in that civics curriculum, it talks about John Locke and Cicero and the need to teach natural law. So the more what
will that do? I'm not following. What do you see that doing?
Okay, you know, our mutual friend Mike
McAvoy,
yeah,
former state representative, yes,
yeah, great guy. I talked to him about natural law, and for about 2 months, he says, "I just don't get what you're talking about," and I kept trying to, you know, make it more concrete for him, and then my daughter-in-law recently said, "People just don't get it when you talk about natural law." And I says, "Yeah, I know they're not getting it. But what natural law does is it says that there's cause and effect in the universe. There's not relativism. One reason all of these things, from pronouns to critical race theory to socialism, is because we're living in this world of relativism. Natural law is
nihilistic, is what it is.
Well, it is. It's a relativistic philosophy. Natural law gives us an antidote for all these problems you've been talking about.
Okay.
So you need to study natural law.
I'm very acquainted with natural law. I'm just asking, what is it that your resolution would do?
Oh, what would it do?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, I got it.
No, I'm not.
I guess I answered the wrong question.
I'm not asking what would natural law do. I'm asking, what does your resolution do?
Sorry for not listening as well as I should.
Sorry, maybe I didn't ask well enough.
Well, whatever. You probably did, actually.
Go ahead.
So what it would do is it gives direction to moving ahead with a standalone civics curriculum. So the standards in that civics curriculum and the content very well could be a Hillsdale.
And that would apply to whom?
All public school kids.
Would it be required, or is it what would?
Well, we'll have to. There is a required civic standard, and the debate on if it should be required or not, I don't know if we've had that, but it very well could be required for graduation.
I mean, it sounds like it would be up to the school districts to implement.
Well, yeah, that's how public education works.
Well, but the standards for
you're not a dictator, are you?
No, but if we're honest about it, I mean, we already dictate the standards. The standard just happens to be more geared towards support of statism.
Yeah.
So why should the statism standard be the default instead of the Hillsdale or some other thing?
Well, that's what we're saying. We're talking about creating these standards that are aligned more with Hillsdale. That's what we're talking about.
But it would not necessarily replace the existing standards.
No, we're creating new ones for standalone civics standards.
Okay.
It's not social studies, it's standalone. Maybe I didn't explain that very well.
Okay.
So it's a standalone civic standards, and we could put these things in them. And I think that'd have a great impact on mental illness, because a lot of mental illness is because people are inventing their own rules. I don't think anything's real. It's kind of nihilistic, what you said.
Yeah, well, I mean, now you've got, I mean, the public education system is heavily invested in social emotional learning, and this claim that what was the figure? 25% of all school kids have some kind of mental health or traumatic experience. It seems as if you're circling the drain if you start taking those kids and adding new government programs onto that, and you're not solving the problem. You're just creating more programs. True?
No, no, actually talking about natural law.
No, no, no. I'm talking about the not talking about natural law. I'm talking about the
Oh,
programs that the state of Idaho has developed along with a lot of other states,
oh,
where they
just
basically said, "Oh my gosh, we have this
like all
problem."
day kindergarten and
All day kindergarten, pre-kindergarten, behavioral health specialists, counseling systems that school counselor used to be about, what do you want to be after you graduate school? Now a school counselor is, well, I know you're inches away from suicide. Let me go fix that for you.
uh, people should, these changes have been happening slowly. So people my age and older probably have no idea what it's like in public school today. I've been subbing this last fall. I was subbing in
I've heard
school.
you say that on the floor today.
Yeah, and then I think it's good to see really the struggles the kids have, the struggles the teachers have. It's a high stress environment, and so we can do some things to help that. But ultimately, the parents have to reclaim their responsibility. They're the change agents.
Is it harder or easier? I kind of wonder about, so look, you have a philosophy about how to approach this that's different from mine. I think that you should go and vote to end the government school system because that's the principled decision. And that's the right decision, even if you don't have the votes for it. But am I wrong?
So there's a
But
difference between.
forgetting the
Are we
ability
going to go
pass it.
philosophical here for a minute?
I just want, let's be philosophical.
Okay, so when you try to visualize in your own mind what natural law is, because that's, to me, there's no law out there where societies work best. And one of those key components for me is where you place responsibility for certain activities.
Right.
One of them is education. So education is the family's responsibility.
Right.
So you go down those and you think, well, what does that really mean? And what could that look like? And you go, well, if really we thought this through, it would look like X. But we're over here at Y.
Right.
So the question for me is not, is X right? It's right. The question is, how do we bring the people and to voluntarily come that direction? Because I'm not going to mandate that they come to my worldview.
No. I'm just asking.
So-
I was really looking forward to this. I knew you were going to get philosophical with me, and I want to be philosophical because okay, I get that. But here's my other question on the philosophical spectrum.
Well, we didn't get to the issue of principle, how that's involved.
Okay,
Principle shines a light on where you want to go,
sure.
but it's not policy, and it's not human interaction. People have to make choices. So there's this freedom, there's agency. And so people have to, the number one thing is for people to take responsibility. The way you give people responsibility is to give them a choice. And so we give them as many choices as we possibly can. Some of the choices you want, I don't think are politically possible in the legislature right now. I'm not happy about that either, but they could be very easily in the future. But what choices we can give, we should give.
Okay,
to try to get us there.
So I'm just playing up the philosophical part of this a little bit. So your approach is, look, here's the Overton window. Here's what I can accomplish in this legislature at this time, which means we'll have this independent learners. What did you call it?
Self-directed
learners. Fine. The question that I wonder about.
Fine.
Well, I mean, but here's why. The question that I wonder about is there the possibility that when you put those programs in place, it further cements the hold of the public education system?
That's a great question.
Okay, what's the answer? Am I wrong to bring that up? I mean,
no, that's a great question. It really is, because there's a perspective that the way you get rid of public education, I'm not saying I want to get rid of it, but I'm just talking philosophically. You do, but is that you make it as bad as possible so people leave.
Well, no, the answer is I don't want to make it as bad as possible so people leave, but I'm wondering.
Well, there are those that believe that.
If you,
didn't accuse you of believing that.
No, my druthers is you fix what you can in the system, but you don't make it so palatable that it replaces the choices that parents would have outside that system.
Right. So that's a really legitimate question, is if we make it more palatable, will we not ever get to the place we really should go?
What's the answer?
And I would say no, and here's why. If you really look at the foundational principles of public education, it's the state's responsible, the state chooses a curriculum, we have a time requirement. The kids are in school a certain amount of time. They all learn the same thing at the same speed. And so if you change those fundamental assumptions, do you still have the same system? So that's a philosophical question I'll throw back at you.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I've been thinking about that too. I'm not sure I buy into the idea. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on this, but I'm not sure I buy into the idea that every student should be learning the same thing.
Well, I don't either.
Okay, so why do we do that? I mean, isn't the secondary effect of that people don't know things outside of that box that the government has said to go teach?
No, that's terrible.
Which is why I wasn't terribly excited about, okay, yes, we'll get rid of Common Core and we're going to replace it with this other thing. But isn't this other thing still this one size fits all and there's not a lot of room for...
So let's analyze the self-directed learner bill, what it does.
No, I'm okay, go ahead. I know you want to talk about the self-directed learner.
Well, but it applies to this conversation.
Sure.
So it starts saying increasing the role of parents.
Right.
It starts saying that students don't have to be in class the same amount of time. If they're learning, they've got flexibility. So it changes that paradigm. And there's one other in there, that they all learn the same thing. That independence and that flexibility allows them to maybe do a piano lesson or swimming or study calculus or whatever they want to do. It allows students to have time to pursue their interests.
But
it's changing the paradigm. It's actually a very powerful bill.
Okay, fair. I don't dispute that. And maybe I'm overemphasizing what I perceive to be the shortcomings but you have to ask for A, it's the exception and not the rule. And B,
what's the exception?
The self-directed learner is the exception, not the rule. The anticipation in the design of the program is that most students are not going to participate.
No, let's talk about that. So I did have a charter school principal call me up, and he said, only 2% of the kids are going to use this. Okay. I mean, I thought in my mind that, I won't tell you what I thought in my mind.
You already started with it, Stephen. You got to keep going.
No, I'm not going to tell you. But Jeff Dillon and Wilder, who's doing something similar, we asked him in committee. I asked him, so what percent of your kids are self-directed learners? And he said, they're not too many, maybe 20 or 30% in elementary or junior high. But because we have this culture of you taking ownership for your own education, that by the time they get to be seniors, over 90% are self-directed learners. So the idea that this is just for a few, no, I think this will be for a lot. Once kids see that they've got some resources in front of them, they've got time to pursue them, then I think they will, because one of the saddest things I saw this year of when I was subbing, I sat down with this little sixth grader and I said, so I can tell you don't like to be in school here. Just talk to my kids. He said, no, I don't really like to be here. Do you know why you're supposed to be here? He says, no. Is there anywhere you'd rather be? Anywhere, if you could be anywhere, is there anything you'd rather be doing? No. That's the sad thing. That he doesn't want to be in school is not the tragedy that he doesn't know what he wants to do with his life. I mean, he could have said video games or eating popsicles, anything, but he said, I don't know what I'd rather do. So this idea of turning kids loose. Now, what this will do, there's probably 30% of that class right now that could be self-directed learners, and they could have some flexibility. He might start seeing some of the things they're doing, and he might be inspired to say, well, maybe I should do my work. He's a bright kid. So this is the thing about freedom and education. A lot of these things, there's a real emotional relationship component to all these things. And sometimes we're up here in the policy arena. We really have to do kind of like the Chicago School of Economics and see how that affects people at the personal level. Because if you can start engaging people at a personal level and they start taking ownership of their own lives, all of a sudden, and we were rewarding work, isn't that amazing? That like advanced opportunities or this self-directed learner, we're going to start rewarding kids who work. We're teaching work ethic in a small way, but we are rewarding work ethic. So, no, I don't think by improving the system, by empowering parents, you're actually going to the goal you want to go to, because the system I want is a parent-driven system.
Which is fine, but the question I have is at what pace?
Well, our friend Mike.
Go ahead, talk about Mike. I love Mike.
We love
Haven't
Mike.
talked to him in a while, but go ahead.
Yeah, we'll have to have breakfast again.
Yeah.
He, when we started this 18 years ago, we said this is a 350-year process. We're down to about 50 years. It's going faster than we anticipated.
50 years that this will solve, the problems will solve, or the system will correct, the parents will have.
At the rate we're going, it's about 50 more
years. Does
years.
the country have 50 more years?
Doesn't matter. Life will go on. We need to go where we need to go. We need to think about where we're going, not where the country's going, because we're going a different direction. I'm going a different direction than where our country's going.
I don't know. I mean, it would see if you were told that you were eating all the wrong foods, and because of your diet, you had 10 years to live. You wouldn't change your diet to something that took 50 years to get better. You would do it right away.
Well, as it can be sped up, as more people understand the power of natural law, the importance of respectful dialogue, the importance of the family rather than funding institutions. We could turn this around in 5 years.
But I did have a
but the inertia's the reason. The status
Sure,
quo.
okay, but so let me go back to the self-directed learner thing a little bit, because
Okay.
again, I'm not taking issue with the bill. I think we were pretty well neutral on it. If memory serves, maybe we were.
You
we
gave
were
it a
positive?
+1.
Did we? Okay, I don't remember. Okay, fine, but ultimately, what you came down to with regard to the policy was, in order to participate in the program, you had to have sign off from the school. You didn't feel comfortable enough to go as far as to say a parent can walk into the Emmett School District superintendent's office and say, my kid Johnny should participate in this program based on how much I know about Johnny. And okay, he's not a great student right now, but if he had the ability to learn video game coding, that would make him enjoy education more and he'd be successful. You didn't feel you could do that.
No. Well, no, I don't think it's wise policy.
Why?
Why? Because one thing about freedom, I've said freedom is the act of accepting responsibility.
Sure.
So you haven't gained the freedom to do flexible things if you're not doing the basics. Because what the basic things in public education aren't overpowering. Most kids can do those. So you need to hit some basics before you have more flexibility. It's just like driving a car, raising a teenager as they have more responsibility to get more freedom. So this is based upon that principle that you gain more flexibility as you exercise more responsibility, and you can be held accountable.
But couldn't a parent make that assessment? I've talked to my kid, and she has promised me that if I put her in this program, she's going to do a lot better, and therefore enroll her in this thing.
She needs to demonstrate that she's going to do it
to the school district, to the government. So the parents.
Well, it's that system.
So we don't trust the parent to make that decision. on their own.
No, I do trust the parent, but they're using the public education system. The public education, in order to function, has to have some stability. This bill is actually pushing the system pretty hard, because some people think it's kind of chaotic. Well, we're going to have kids doing all sorts of different things. I say, yeah, that could be really good. Of course, you have to agree. The reason they have to have an agreement between the parent and the student and the teacher is because some things that the student needs to be there, either a testing day or they're having a certain type of class where it just makes it easier for the teacher to have everybody there. So they need to negotiate those things. But we're really opening it. We're opening it multiple times more than to choice that the parents have ever had before. So for the system to function and the parents to have choice, I think it's a pretty good balance.
But still, that 50-year period, doesn't that worry you?
I'll be dead.
I won't.
Well,
and I hope that's not always the answer as well. I'll be gone by then.
So this is part of the thing about relativism versus natural law. Natural law, you make sacrifices for the next generation. Relativism, it's all live in the here and now. And so those of us trying to build a future out there for our children and grandchildren, maybe even great grandchildren, we're willing to take the arrows and do the effort so that they can have a better world than the one we're going down. We've got some real problems in the United States, and we need to build what we're trying to build so the people can see that we have a plan. You want to be part of this community. You don't want to be part of a community that you're going to be canceled any specific day if you don't say exactly what everybody else is saying.
You're absolutely right.
We don't want to live in that. So let's build the one we want. As more people, if I was more articulate, so my weakness is the ideas in my head are great, but I don't articulate them very well. If I was as good as,
that's not something I can help you with.
Yeah, well, if I was,
sounds like a you problem.
It's a me problem. I said it was my problem. So if I could articulate some of these ideas and so people could feel the power of them and how they could help implement them, we could turn things around really quickly in the state of Idaho.
But doesn't that mean, and I'm sorry, because you said earlier when we started this program, and I asked you, what's the status of the education system? And you said mediocre.
Mediocre.
Isn't that something that just
So
requires just a lot more? I mean, I gave you the example. You might remember a number of years ago.
And I got to go in 10 minutes.
Sure. You might remember a couple of years ago, there was a bill called the School Turnaround Act. And that was from Senator Mortimer when he was the chairman of the Senate Education Committee. And the bill basically said, if you have a school that's failing, you have 5 years to turn things around. And we ran around to pass the Senate easily. I don't remember how you voted on it, but pass the Senate easily, gets over the House, and we said, listen, imagine you're having a heart attack and you get rolled into the hospital emergency room, and you ask your doctor, how good a hospital is this? And he says, don't worry, we're in the 3rd year of our 5-year turnaround. You'd get up and leave, right? But with the education system, we kind of say, okay, well, it's going to take some time. Might take 15 years, might take 20 years, might take 30 years of mediocrity. Your kids and grandkids will all graduate from a mediocre public education system.
Well, when I talked about 50 years, I was talking about a whole lot of other issues besides just schools. But the point that you're bringing up that people should understand is that you can't rely on the public education system to see your kids are educated. If you're doing that, they're going to probably fail. Parents, you've got to see that it happens. And so that's why we're trying to give them the voice so they can be the change agents. It will always be the parents' responsibility.
So doesn't that necessitate putting your foot down and saying, no, we've got to go and do more than we're doing now, instead of just settling for, okay, well, I've got this incremental thing that I managed to get done? It's different philosophical approach. You've settled for the incremental one. I'm saying, looks like you ought to throw a grenade in the room and see what blows up.
That sounds like anarchy.
Not at all. It sounds like being
Well,
true to principles. I never said anything about
Well,
anarchy. I just
well, you said throw a hand grenade and blow it.
metaphorically.
Well,
Metaphorically.
metaphorically, blow things up, sounds a little bit.
You're in a crisis. Your education system isn't
So,
teaching.
so we just
kids are
fundamentally disagree on
kids
their
are
approach.
kids are graduating school unable to read, write, do math, and certainly don't know anything about history. Weezer School, I keep bringing it, Weezer School District, 90% of the kids can't pass the standardized college entrance exam. 90%. In Fruitland, I think it's 25%. That's like, who wants that? I'm sorry, 25% can pass it. So 10% in Weezer pass, 25% in Fruitland do. 50% is the norm in Idaho. Pretty, and okay. We're going to disagree on the approach. I get it. One more question, and this has nothing to do with education. It has to do with something that happened on the Senate floor the other day, which was Senator Zito had a motion to send the tax cut bill to the amending order. She was supported by the 7 Democrats. Fine, whatever. The Senate Republican caucus put out a news release that made it sound as if her intention was to reduce the size of the tax cut. Is that okay?
No.
And yet, when she went to go read her statement on the floor, she was shut down by Kelly Anton.
Well, there's 2 separate issues. I expressed to leadership that I thought the letter that the caucus put out, because I didn't know about the letter until I got it. I didn't write it. But I thought it was inappropriate and it had been handled differently. So I expressed to them my dissatisfaction with that.
Good.
Uh,
Getting shut down on the Senate floor trying to make a statement about what
well,
or setting the record straight sounds like is what she was attempting to do.
Yeah. So procedurally, that did follow Mason's orders. What Kelly Anthony was trying to do was he's trying to go at ease so he could visit with her.
I know.
Well, she wouldn't let him do that, so he moved to adjourn.
He could have made a motion to go at ease.
I support that. I support what he did.
Well, yeah, because you didn't vote to.
No, I supported to do that, and I don't want to throw her or him or anybody under the buses, but there's certain ways you act in the Senate and in different places, and there's just decorum that you need to follow.
We didn't know what her statement was going to be until she started to make it.
Well, and we let her go on for 3 minutes.
About the history of the state Senate and the women's role in it.
Yeah.
She didn't get to the substance of what she wanted to talk about.
No, but she didn't have the permission of the personal privilege. If you read the rules, what personal privilege is, that didn't fall within it. We're kind of loose on that, but she was going a place that was not going to be a good place to go. So
it just looked really ugly.
It was ugly. It was very sad.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that. Glad to hear you at least call out the press release. I just sure would have liked to see Christie get a bit more support on the. Shouldn't Anton have made a motion to go at ease instead of to adjourn? That at least would have given her a chance.
He runs the floor, so I support what he did. Kelly Anthony's one of the good guys.
Okay. Anything else we need to cover before we let you get out of here?
No, I need to go home and go to bed. You're keeping me up late.
You look tired. Well, hey, I appreciate you being here. Dustin, who are we going to have next time? I don't remember. Oh, geez. Well, come back Tuesday for another episode. You'll enjoy it. And don't forget to tune in to the Steph Lucas program on Friday to recap the week. Don't pay attention to those other programs like Idaho Reports on government television. That's not the way to get your news about what really happens at the legislature. Until next time, thanks for watching.